But if that's your kid, now you've got to start saying, wow, is something going on here? Or is this kind of normal adolescence? But it requires you to pay attention. If you're not sure how to answer the question, go to school, ask the counselor, say, hey, listen, here's a list of stuff that I'm concerned about with my kid. What do you think? How's school? What's he like in school? How's our friendship relationships? Because risk factors will jeopardize your kid. And we don't want you to be fooled thinking that they're normal adolescents. You see right there in the middle, these feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, powerlessness, and desperation. We talked about that earlier. This is huge, history of trauma or abuse. This is huge for you, and it's huge for your kids. One of my favorite conversations, my favorite words to talk about this is there crap going on in your life or in your kid's life? Crap that really sabotages who they are, where you begin to see at early ages the not wanting to be close, or 8-year-olds adopting 16-year-old behavior. You know, it's interesting. I've been in education long enough, and what the phrase goes, what we used to see in high school, now we see in middle school. What we used to see in middle school, now we see in elementary school. And it doesn't mean it's a natural evolution. Kids are exposed to a lot of stuff. They're exposed to stuff in the house, on TV, through the internet, through friends, a lot of stuff. And because they're kids, they don't filter it appropriately. They kind of like the juice, the feel of it all. So therefore, this history here of trauma or abuse is really significant. Or, if there's somebody in the family that has made a suicide attempt, and by suicide, everybody in the family is at great risk. It's just the data. It's not a predictor, it's the data. What it says is what goes on in the family that they get that far along that they want to die to find some peace. That's how complex it is. So here's where I want to make a point. The media will want you to believe that bullying causes suicide. It does not. It doesn't mean kids aren't bullied. It does not mean that kids who have been bullied do not take their own life. It doesn't mean that. It means it's not a causal factor in A to B. It's a contributing factor. It's on the list of risk, high-risk behaviors. Being bullied is a risk factor. It creates depression. It creates disconnection. It creates shutdown. That's absolutely true. But in and of itself, it doesn't. So let's start over here. We already talked about age, right? We know these peaks of 9 to 24, 35 to 45, and 85 plus. It doesn't mean that there aren't suicides in those age groups in between, but that's where the peaks are for reasons that we understand are social peaks. For instance, in middle age, and by the way, they're mostly white males. But there have been some increases in our Latina kids, and we're beginning to see now at middle age a higher rate of suicide deaths among our females. The landscape is changing. Up here we talk about age group. This is sex and sexual orientation. So gender, just mentioned the male-female. Sexual orientation. Kids who in fact either question or have defined themselves differently, feel differently, and are at a higher risk not because of the LGBT factor. They're at a higher risk because we marginalize those children in our culture. Parents have a difficult time accepting that, if that's a factor for their kids. So therefore, that's a risk factor, right there. Alcohol and street drugs, can't normalize that. Sure, you can have wine with us at dinner. I'm not going to get into your business of what's right, what's wrong. I'm not. Other than to say that, I'm really concerned when kids need to numb it somehow. They need to sneak the vodka somehow. They need to do the marijuana trip somehow, because that's about numbing pain. The question is, why are they in pain? That's where we as detectives and moms and dads say, yeah, how come our kids are in pain? Oh my God, we've got a good income, we live in a good community, we're all healthy. What is going on here? Something's not tracking the way that it should. That's a great question and a great conversation. So right there, what we find is sexual orientation, alcohol, street drugs, age and sex, history of trauma or abuse. I mentioned that. That's a high risk factor. Psychotic processes and psychiatric disorders. Now, as a therapist, I am not real big in labeling kids and sticking labels on kids' foreheads that they're bipolar or or that they have a generalized anxiety disorder. I'm comfortable doing that. I will talk with you and your kid about the behavior and what we can do about the behavior. But those things down there are when behavior does not fit within a norm, but really peaks. So what does it look like? It could look like sleep disorder. Now, be careful, because in adolescents, if they're on their devices until 2 in the morning, they have a sleep disorder, but it's not a disorder. It's just that nobody's policing their device use, and therefore their body's not getting sleep, and therefore what's going to happen is physical stuff, emotional stuff will happen inside their body. Right? So that sleep disorder may be external, that may be device-oriented. If they don't have a routine in which they begin to slow it down and shut it down as they get in to the evening, if they don't get their hours, if they can't catch up on their hours, we can do an occasional night that's more homework than normal, or was that practice late, or whatever. We can do that, but let's police the sleep, because it's how the body renews and restores. It's a critically important piece. So that can contribute to anxiety, it can contribute to depression. Now, let's be careful with depression, because we all throw that out too easily. Ah, geez, I missed the sale, I'm depressed. Come on, I know you say that. We all do. Ah, I thought I was going to get a better grade, I'm depressed. I was up for that job and didn't get it, I'm depressed. And what it really means is I'm sad I didn't get it, I'm sad I didn't do it, I'm sad I missed it. So we got to be really careful when we hear the word depression. Here's why. Because if you hear it too often, you won't pay attention to it when it's real. So let's make a distinction between sadness and depression. Let's make a distinction between anxiety and excitement. I can't sleep, I'm so excited about what's going on. Oh, I wonder if my kid has an anxiety disorder. No. They're really excited because tomorrow's going to be a special day. So being able to be subtle in your understanding of how our kids are reacting to life is critically important for parents. Access to means, we talked about it. Guns and pills. Hopelessness, burdensomeness. Sometimes our kids, believe it or not, do have a measure of that. Let me give you, for instance, because this is a real case, for instance. There was a situation in which there were two adolescents in the family, and one of the two just really struggled a lot. Didn't do as well in school, made frequent overtures that they wanted to die, or would drink in excess, and so there was this history, right? And what happened was this kid got to the point where what he felt was he was a burden to mom and dad. They got calls from school, another doctor's appointment, money spent for counselors that they couldn't afford, and so on and so on. And the kid began to feel like he was a burden. And it was really important for those parents to say, hey, yes, this is a struggle for us, but oh my God, no, you're not a burden. This is what we do. This is what mom and I do, and we'll make it okay for us. That's the message, because we don't want our kids at any age to feel like they're a burden. Previous suicide attempt, family history of suicide. You gotta be really careful with that. Have that conversation among yourselves as husband and wife. If you're a single parent, ask your parents, hey, listen, do we ever have a suicide in the family? Because I'm really concerned about Johnny and George. Because history of it is a risk factor. Poor social supports. Isolation, isolation, isolation. Lost a friends group, doesn't have friends at all. Really difficult connecting. And that can be a genuine, real issue for kids, just like it can be for you guys. It's important for you to be socially connected. The more you're isolated, the less healthy you are. So what we want to take a look at is this issue of poor social supports. It's a risk factor, not a predictor. It's a risk factor. Impulsivity, aggression, and anxiety. I'm okay with anger. I'm okay with anger. When I'm with adolescents who are angry, I can sit with it, because usually there's a backstory that tells me why, in fact, that they're angry. What I won't tolerate is rage. Rage is not a good sign. That is not normal adolescence. How would you know rage? Rage is where your kid turns into somebody that you look at him like, oh my God, what's going on? It's the F you, it's in your face, I don't have to listen to you. It's breaking things. It's punching holes in the wall. That's a non-suicidal self-injury, but it's an indicator of being out of his own control. that even his control system is not in charge anymore, or hers. So let's pay attention to that. Impulsivity sometimes is an issue of lack of coping skills. There are temperaments. We're all born with a temperament. Sometimes we're a little bit more excitable as infants and babies and toddlers and grown-up kids, and sometimes we're a little bit more placid, a little bit more easygoing. That's a temperament issue. It can create problems, but as long as the nest is really tight, as long as there's still this human contact and attachment, as long as you're still building hopefulness and you're still building connection with your kid, you can overcome that piece. Recent losses, I have a slide later on, will show you how a suicide thinking happens. Recent losses can be any loss that can trigger an already burdened and overwhelmed system. Sometimes the loss is, sometimes it is the death of a loved one. That's why the school went so quickly on a response on this, because here's one of the things they can't tell. They can't predict every kid's behavior. They don't know the inside story of every child. They have some kids on their radar that they're worried about, but not all kids are on their radar. So therefore, one of the things that we always talk about is there was a loss. All right, let's pick up let's broaden the radar screen, because we want to take a look at kids who don't show up. Kids are irritable. Mom and dad are calling. My kid's been away. He's crying all the time. I want to die too. Whatever the behavior is, don't normalize that. If you're not quite sure what to do with it, call in and say, what do I do with this? And together there will a direction and a solution. Chronic illness, mostly that's for our elders. I talked about that group 85 and on up. The burdensome, that's usually health issues and pain issues, and don't forget access to lots of medication too. And then the last one is barriers and beliefs. And that is, are there taboos in your family that keep your kids safe, or are there absence of taboos that in fact raise risk? We'll show you what that is too. Complicated though, right? It's not A to B. It's just like bullying creates suicide. No. This happened when we go in and do a response with kids who are survivors of suicide. We'll have kids raise their hand and say, I know why George died. I know why he killed himself. Why is that? Because she broke up with him. That wasn't the reason. That may have been the stressor. That may have been the stress event, but under that foundation there's a kid who's so vulnerable that he couldn't weather the storm of a broken heart. And we have to think of it in terms of that. It's not because of where you live. It's not because of your political persuasion. Those factors are not factors that create suicide. In some ways, they may, in fact, be contributing factors. Greater risk. We already said this. If your kid or somebody in your family has already made a suicide attempt, they are 40 times more likely to make that attempt again. Why do I put that up there? Because what I don't want you to do is we so want to believe the crisis is over. It's kind of like your kid has been sick for a long time, and you're just waiting for the words that says, I'm better. You're waiting for the doctor to say things will be okay. Because we were so worried. Here's what happens sometimes when kids make an attempt on their lives. They'll say to their parents, oh my God, that scared me so much, I promise you I will never do that again. That's a nice thing to hear, but don't lower your guard on that, because somebody who has made an attempt is 40 times more likely to do it again. What do you do with that? Call the counselor, call your private therapist, you talk to your pediatrician, you do a family meeting with your kid. You're never judgmental, you're only really, really sympathetic and empathic. You say, I'm not quite sure what to do, it's your dad. But I gotta tell you, we're gonna do something. We're gonna get some help. There's the major depression or the drug abuse or the bipolar. Usually the schizophrenia issue doesn't come until probably after high school. Very treatable now, which is good news. And there's the alcohol abuse. Don't normalize that. All kids drink, right? No. All kids smoke weed, right? No. Don't normalize it. Because I always question whether or not I don't like it when I'm feeling real. I don't like it when I'm feeling grounded and honest and present. I really only like it when I'm feeling the numbness going on that the alcohol and the drugs do.